Kia ora, good afternoon, I'm Evie Ashton. In 3 News, a 12-year-old Palestinian boy has been shot dead while trying to stop others from breaching a tenuous ceasefire agreement with Israel. A homicide inquiry is underway after a 24-year-old man was stabbed to death in Milton, South Otago, and after an EU summit fraught with violent clashes between Swedish police and protesters, French President Chirac was recorded telling the Swedish Prime Minister, quote, "It is very dangerous and you could have killed people." More news in an hour.
Today's news is on 3.
Good afternoon and welcome to No.8 Wired, where we're putting the country on air.
Not only that, prize-winning putting the country on air too. No.8 Wired was awarded the Landcorp Communicator of the Year at Mystery Creek this past week, so something for the crew to crow about. Now, in the program this week, Jerem Satanovic goes to Hawke's Bay to find a redwood grove and a farmer who's now enjoying the trees he planted nearly half a century ago.
A bit like being an alcoholic. The more you plant, the more you want to plant.
And needed Jerem, though, to work out how much he was earning per hectare from them.
And we also hear from Niwa about carbon credits. But first, the news of the week.
News brought to you by RD1.com, New Zealand's rural website.
The 33rd Mystery Creek Field Days are promising record sales to many of the nearly 1,000 exhibitors at the Hamilton site over the past few days. Field Days opened with the usual fanfare on Wednesday.
This year, to everyone's delight, it's likely to be an event marked by its optimism.
The main complaint from farmers going to the field days doesn't seem to be that the price of what's on offer, but rather how long the delay will be before delivery. Otago-based meat processor PPCS are poised to take control of Hawke's Bay meat processor Richmond after buying nearly half of the shares held by Active Equities to add to the shareholding it already had. PPCS's shareholding is short of a majority, but through an arrangement with Active Equities, effectively takes over the Richmond boardroom. Richmond's issued, in the meantime, a statement claiming that it's still business as usual, while Rich Hold, set up to protect Richmond from the Southern takeover, is to disband. The Meat and Wool Board venture Sheep Improvement Limited SIL says it aims to have at least 600 breeders joined up by September. SIL General Manager George Cruikshank says as breeders add information to their sheep recording besides mating, birth and weaning data to include weight gains throughout their first year, it becomes increasingly worthwhile to sign on to the performance recording scheme. The Merino New Zealand Fine Wool Business Plan aims to increase its share of the domestic market from 69% to 74% within 5 years. The uncharacteristically modest aim by Merino New Zealand follows the announcement by Merino New Zealand to form a commercial partnership with Wrightson. More ambitious are Merino New Zealand's aims to increase direct selling by 15% and farm profitability by 6% a year over 5 years. Federated Farmers High Country Committee has launched a booklet, Tussock Grasslands, Our Heritage. It aims to show the potential in the high country as well as the difficulties in farming the land. The chair, Alistair Ensor, says the tussock land, contrary to the opinion of many, can be farmed and managed as a conservation estate at the same time.
News brought to you by RD1.com, New Zealand's rural website.
Whether you've got trees for profit, pleasure, protection, or a combination of all three, stands like these are being increasingly included into the farming landscape. Farm forestry advocates reckon 10% of the average farm in well-tended mature trees will come close to doubling the value of the property. The experts say that successfully integrating forestry into your farm business is all about making good decisions about the best use of available land. Here near Dartmoor, inland from Napier, the Hartree family have developed 2 properties that successfully combine forestry within their farm system. Tom Hartree and his son Greg farm 2 properties, Te Moto and Naroto. Together it's an area of 1,015 hectares. The family first took up land in this district back in 1903, and Tom's been farming in this area since 1956. The home block at Te Moto was bare when Tom joined the family farm business. There's now 80 hectares of production forestry, 90 hectares of retired river and stream edge, and 45 hectares in QE2 covenants on the 2 blocks.
Well, we always called it a grass desert. There was very little water and no trees. So in 1960, Dora and I were married and the tree planting started and we started building large dams for water and things like this.
So what was that initial motivation? Was that for production or pleasure or protection?
A little bit of everything, I would think, all those three things. I've always been interested in conservation and trees, and it was just a natural progression. I think it was a bit like Topsy, it just grew. But building the dams was a big, major one that put us into it, because we started seeing bird life arrive, and then with fencing little bits off and planting oak trees and things around the edge, we found we enhanced the value of the water. There wasn't so much urine and faeces going into it with fencing the water areas off. The grass that grew long was great places for ducks to nest and things like this. And the trees gave us shelter. But, you know, starting planting when I was a young man, say of 26, that was fairly early on in the job, and lots of people used to think we were quite mad doing this sort of thing, and I suppose they were understandably right in those early days, but in the long term it's turned out to be the right thing.
This farm business runs sheep, beef and more recently dairy grazers. Greg Hartree says the aim of the operation is to keep labour costs to a minimum and have a flexible farm system that's capable of being comfortably run by himself and his father.
Dairy grazers come on from June the 1st, the main bulk of them, which is about 800, and they'll rattle through for 6 weeks, and our ewes will come very much straight behind them and start lambing.
So are you carrying your own breeding stock here?
We're carrying about 320 cows, and we finish everything they produce as well at the end.
And the sheep side, how many are you wintering here?
We scanned 1,600, we've got 1,500 to lamb, and we'll probably do about 120%. Because we put the ram to them so early, that we don't have a high expectation of having a lot of twins or multiples.
Sheep and cattle are grazed on only 73% of the available land. Some 80 hectares is in production pine. Around 5 hectares was planted by the family in 1973 and has been recently harvested. The net return for the block, over $700 per hectare per year over the 28-year rotation. For Tom, it's difficult country with little topsoil and well suited to trees.
We used to get sheep caught up in the blackberry bushes. It was hard mustering, and we just thought it was better out of the farm in trees rather than in pasture.
Retiring harder to manage areas of the farm and the shift in management with the introduction of the dairy grazers 5 years ago has seen some benefits in terms of profitability. But Tom Hartree isn't aware of having worked to a specific plan in integrating the farming with the trees.
I think foremost as a farmer, you've got to think of your farm first and then think of the business part of it. Thinking back historically, our income is going up all the time. It's not going down. Maybe that's thanks to higher returns for stock at this present time, but over a period of time, we haven't noticed any difference in the income with locking up these pieces of land with trees. I honestly think it has enhanced the farm.
And that's something, Greg, that you're looking to persevere with?
You're just backing that up. I think it makes you more aware of what you got, and it makes you more intense to make that piece of land that you haven't locked up work better. So in the long run, it's beneficial.
There's now around 90 hectares of the property that's been retired into trees or dams in the name of conservation and ease of management. This block is typical.
Well, first off, it was because of a gorge-like situation where we lost stock in the bottoms here on rough banks, and it was an ideal place to trial cedars and redwoods.
Right.
And as time's gone by, we've seen where the cedars do well and where the redwoods do well, and for future planting, it's been a great experimental block.
So were there any other environmental considerations in planting things here?
Not really, no. It was an area that shouldn't be farmed.
This stand of redwoods was planted by Tom and his wife Dora in 1969, but planting them here wasn't a business decision.
No, it's a love affair, yeah. I think really it's our hobby. Dora and I don't play golf or go away on weekends and things like that. We plant trees, and it's just been one of those ongoing things. And the more we plant, it's a bit like being an alcoholic. The more you plant, the more you want to plant.
But trees like these also represent a move away from large monocultures of pines that some are suggesting leaves our forests dangerously exposed to pest, disease and fire. Earlier trials with the Californian redwood in New Zealand in the 1920s and 40s weren't that encouraging. But with the success of sites like these, and the increasing demand for the timber, there's a growing interest in alternative species, like this one.
Unfortunately, I think redwoods in New Zealand have been planted in the wrong place often, and they're very site-specific.
The redwoods like river silt and need to be out of the wind. This valley flat is an ideal location.
The species that do well in my particular area you could count on the fingers of your hand, and I don't think it's going to get any greater than that.
And this is the timber from thinnings of two species that do particularly well here.
Well, the top one here is a piece of redwood, and the bottom one underneath here is the cedar, and both have been harvested off the farm from trees that Dora and I planted in 1959. The cedar we found is a very durable hardwood, and the redwood is very light wood, but very good for internal construction of barns, houses and things like that.
Is this the payoff, seeing it like this, or you prefer it seeing standing?
I prefer to see it standing, but we had to thin the block, and this is just one of the things that came out of it. And as I've said previously, it's a little bit of a study on the tree, and just to see what we're going to do with it in the future. And I think it's got a potential for future plantings in Hawke's Bay, especially not having to tannalise it and do things like that with it.
But whether it's the slightly reluctant felling of redwood or cedar, or the pragmatic decision to bowl and process this 100-year-old macrocarpa into firewood and fencing battens, trees and timber are very much part of the Hartree's way of life. And it wouldn't be stretching a long bow to suggest that the dollar value of the timber in most of the fenced-off areas of their property is not really a major consideration. For Tom, it's about values other than the bottom line.
Well, it's the joy to live with your land, isn't it? And that old saying is that we should always leave our land in better order than when we first took it over. Well, here on Te Motu, we have water, we have trees, we're producing more money than we've ever produced off our land before, I think, from the warmth of our pastures, for growing, for having trees around the edges of them and things like this all helps. We're definitely producing more per hectare off our better land than we ever did before we had trees and water.
This week I'd like to talk about the new developments at vetservice.co.nz. Since our launch 3 months ago, we've attracted over 1,500 members, and it's got to the stage where our site needs need to better reflect our members' needs. This is why we're splitting our website into 3 areas: rural only, pet only and vet only. Our goal is to have a very different environment and community within each website so that our members' needs are better reflected. In the next 4 weeks, you'll see some additions to our website which are going to help you whether you have a pet or a farm. In the rural website, we've partnered with fencepost.com to offer unique farm advisory tools which you're able to use in conjunction with your local vet to help you with all your animal health issues. Some of these will include nutrition advice, farm monitoring tools, specialised dairy, beef and sheep advice, as well as business planning tools to increase your farm's profitability. If you have a pet and have enjoyed the services up until now, you'll be happy to see the new pet side as there is more information, competitions, SPCA-specific information throughout the new site, as well as some new features which will include an online magazine with topical articles, Adopt a Pet, Pet of the Week, Lost and Found Pets, as well as specialised nutrition advice for your pet. Finally today, I would like to offer 2 more viewers the opportunity to win a 2.5 litre pack of Epronex Pour-On, valued at over $350 each. All you have to do is log on to vetservice.co.nz and register as a member to win.
Environment Watch, brought to you by Summit Quinfos. Make a change for good.
The Kyoto Protocol is still a live issue for New Zealand, despite the United States going sour on the Convention on Reducing Greenhouse Gases. With typical Kiwi pragmatism, most farmers know that eventually the facts will settle the matter. And in the meantime, climate change remains an important part of New Zealand's public goods science program. We welcome today Dr. Martin Manning, an atmospheric chemist and climate scientist from NIWA. Firstly, what's New Zealand's contribution to international understanding about the greenhouse problem?
Well, New Zealand scientists have been studying the atmosphere for a long time. And in fact, we can go right back to the 1950s and find New Zealand scientists at the forefront of determining the type of carbon dioxide that was in the atmosphere and realizing that it was humans that were actually changing the amount of carbon dioxide. And more recently, in the 1970s, we started a major program looking at the amount of carbon dioxide. We started looking at clean air in Wellington Southerlies, coming into an observation site we have just outside of Wellington Harbour. And we find that the levels of pollutants are as low as practically anywhere else in the world. And what we see, though, is still the amount of carbon dioxide increasing steadily year by year. More recently, we've worked with gases like methane, and which is another important greenhouse gas, and done a lot of work on understanding where that gas is coming from. So New Zealand overall has played quite a big role in understanding the fact that we're changing the atmosphere, that it's due to people, and that it will cause climate change.
Where does New Zealand stand in the global carbon equation compared to other countries?
Well, if you look at our emissions of carbon dioxide, they're actually, per capita, they're actually relatively low compared to, say, the OECD average. Whereas the Kyoto Protocol requires us to add some other gases as well, in particular methane and nitrous oxide, which come very largely from agricultural activities. When we add those as well, New Zealand no longer looks so good. In fact, we're on the high side. There's a third thing that you can factor in there as well, and we plant forests, and we're expanding the area of our forests, and trees grow by taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. So that's on the benefit side of the equation, and when you add those in, we come down a bit, but we're still not among the best of countries.
What else can New Zealand farmers do apart from plant trees?
Well, restoring eroded land might actually be one of the best things that New Zealand should concentrate on in the next few years. There's a lot of potential, I think, for rebuilding carbon stocks in the soils and in the vegetation on eroded lands, and that could be quite significant.
Assuming that the Kyoto Protocol is ratified by everyone, including the US, what are the benefits for New Zealand?
Well, we started with high emissions in 1990. Credits are relative to, for what we do relative to 1990. And so it gives us a big opportunity to reduce emissions from animals, for example. And there's increasingly, I think, signs from the research community that there are lots of options there. And that we can make similar gains in carbon credits in the agricultural sector just from animals and modifying the way we farm animals as we would do in the forestry sector as well. So something of the order of perhaps $100 million a year.
How would farmers actually get that money, though?
Well, the transfers have to occur between an emitter, someone who has to start emitting more carbon dioxide because of their activities, and someone who's doing something which is beneficial. And so it's a trade-off. And so the trick will be to manage this whole process in a way that's logistically feasible in New Zealand, let's say for groups of farmers, and interface that to an international trading regime.
Thanks, Martin. You can check out the greenhouse gas charts on NIWA's site, which can be accessed from no.8.co.nz.
Environment Watch, brought to you by Summit Quinfos. Make a change for good. Pasture Bulletin, brought to you by Summit Quinfos, keeping New Zealand in clover.
There's enough soil moisture through the North Island now to grow normal winter pasture, except for those inevitable occasional cold days. This week, coastal temperatures should be near normal overall, but cooler inland pasture growth is likely to be marginally lower than average. But the north of the South Island is still waiting for substantial rain to lift soil moisture, and pasture production in Nelson and Marlborough is likely to remain below average. Canterbury and East Otago pastures should be growing at about normal winter rates. In Southland, a little better pasture growth is possible this week, especially in sheltered localities. Westland coastal districts should be near normal.
Pasture Bulletin, brought to you by Summit Quinfos, keeping New Zealand in clover.
When harvest time comes for all those pine trees that have been planted over recent years, it looks like we're going to have a dearth of skilled workers and a shortage of roading and processing capacity, to name but a few of the problems. The government's anticipated these issues in the budget, but Rob, what are we going to do to ensure we can mill those trees?
Well, as you may know, forestry is on the stage of a very, very big increase in production. In fact, the current year we're milling about 18 million cubic metres, and in 5 years we expect to mill about 32 million. So it's a big increase. That is going to present problems and challenges in terms of how we cope with that. Most of the increases will be in new forest areas that probably have a very poor roading structure.
Like where?
In the East Coast, North Island, North Auckland.
I mean, who's going to pay for that?
Well, what we've said to the government, and the government's agreed with this, is that they have a responsibility, both central and local government, to upgrade those roads. A lot of work has gone in. There is an exercise in Gisborne called the Road Strategy Working Group, and that's identified what needs to be done, what money needs to be spent, which particular roads need upgrading, And that exercise, now that it's got through that planning phase, will proceed. At the end of the day, the money will need to come from central and local government.
So growers won't have to put any money into roading?
They have paid over 28 or 30 years a lot of money by way of rates, and they now expect that money to be used to make sure the roads are in adequate condition when they come to harvest.
And processing, are we going to have enough mills to handle this wood when it comes on stream? That's
a big issue. It's going to, the Ministry of Forestry have indicated that we need about another $5 to $6 billion in investment over the next, say, 10 years.
So where's that going to come from?
Most of our major mills today are owned by foreign companies, and that's brought tremendous benefits to New Zealand by opening up markets and bringing in capital. So most of it will come from that source. I think the thing to realise, though, is that even though we've got this massive amount of wood coming on stream in the next 5 years, virtually a doubling of our current capacity or our current supply, unlike other products, that does not need to be processed, say, at year 28 or year 20 or 30. It can stay in the ground and grow in probably value because it's getting bigger and probably the quality is improving. So that investment must come on stream, though, because at the moment, forestry is the third largest export earner at about $3.6 billion. If we can effectively harvest and process this in New Zealand, we can see that going up to about $14 billion in about 20 years. So tremendous possibilities there.
Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Rachel.
Otago-based meat processor PPCS has at last succeeded to effectively take control of Hawke's Bay-based processor Richmond, despite Hawke's Bay farmer attempts to ward off the raids by such action as setting up shareholder group Rich Hold. PPCS has bought enough active equities shares and an option to buy more later to make PPCS the majority shareholder. John Foster, former chief executive of Richmond's, what does this mean, this takeover, now almost certain, for the average Hawke's Bay farmer?
Well, I wouldn't call it almost certain yet. They have now acquired half the active equity, 36% stake, together with their 17% that they got on the market recently. And that situation will not be increased, apparently, this side of February 2003, when they have the opportunity to possibly acquire the balance of the active equity stake, which
gives them a controlling balance of the shares. And in the meantime, of course, the axe hangs over the head of Richmond as far as that takeover is concerned. Effectively a takeover, what does it mean?
It will create some uncertainty until PPCS spell out very clearly to the various stakeholders of Richmond exactly what changes they plan for that company.
If PPCS behave consistently in the North Island, the way that they operate in the South Island, what again will that mean?
I think there's a difference in culture between the two companies. If I might be so bold as to say, I think Richmond has been a fairly democratic, open company that enjoys partnerships. The way I read PPCS over my period of involvement with the industry was that they're far more autocratic and tend to do things their way on their own. And I think there is bound to be some tension if that is applied to the existing Richmonds in the future.
Isn't there another layer to it as well, though, that Richmond is known as an innovator? At Mystery Creek, when I asked Jim Anderton where was innovation in modern New Zealand agriculture, and he unhesitatingly named Richmond, whereas PPCS is not so much the innovation, let somebody else do that.
Yes,
Aren't there consequences there?
I think there are. Richmond recently created the world first with their DNA sourcing product back to the farm, and have been very, very keen on producing new products and bringing about advances. They've had a history of that. If one goes back to the partnership with Dawn Meat in building the beef plant, the attempts to, with Dawn Meat to build Oringi, the Meat Authority hearings, the failure of all those, and then their successful lobbying for the licensing of the processing industry, the first company to wet blue hides in New Zealand, a host of things. When the national schedule was abandoned, Richmond was the first company to announce a company schedule. Went further. I think I was accused of going religious by having a live session in front of federated farmers on setting the schedule so that farmers could understand exactly what the numbers, where they came from.
And in this modern age, you have a high-profile chief executive, you have food branding rather than meat processing. All the innovation seems to be driving there that you would feel is at risk?
I would hope not. I would think, I would hope that PPCS would observe the sense of this move. We have for many years survived to some degree by taking cost out. I think we've reached pretty much the end of the road there. It's now getting more out of the marketplace and positioning the products at the top end of the consumer list. That is where the future lies in getting more money back to this country and to the farmer.
Now there is, of course, the situation where we have 4 major meat processors. If this was reduced effectively to 3, you would have almost a monopoly right through the southern North Island and the northern south, with some exceptions. But there is that worry, again, the procurement battle, farmers being able to choose, seems to be for both lamb, beef and venison now taken away.
I don't think I can agree with that. The South Island and North Island, although some stock does transport across Cook Strait, tend to be different markets on the procurement front. And there are a different set of competitors for Richmond, as there are a different set of competitors for PPCS in the respective islands. So I think competition is not going to be affected, I wouldn't imagine, in terms of procurement.
Again, crystal ball gazing, but what's going to happen now with AFCO in the far north, down to Wairoa, Imlay, and Alliance sitting there based in Southland? They must be very keen to take advantage of whatever develops.
Yes, I just can't speculate for AFCO or Alliance. They've been around a long time. They work together fairly closely in marketing. I'm sure they've had dialogue at various times in the last 20 years.
Now, Richhold was set up to keep ownership of Richmond in Hawke's Bay farmers' hands. Now that it looks like the battle's been lost, what is Richhold going to do?
We've decided to liquidate. That will mean putting the Richmond share scrip back in the hands of those Richhold shareholders.
John Foster, thank you for joining us on No. 8 Wired. Remember the good old days in the wool industry, before all those consultants and the master strategists got at it?
With wool prices staying at a high level, there has been over recent years a steady increase in New Zealand's sheep population. 750,000 more sheep every year.
And someday soon we ought to be back to 36 million sheep in New Zealand. That clip was from a BNZ travelling film show doing the rounds of Waikato, starting with the field days. So see our diary for the location details.
If you would like more information, contacts, or want to tell us what you think of us, you can contact us at No. 8 Wired, Box 6185 Te Aro, Wellington, fax us on 04 384 4727, or email no8wired@gibson.co.nz. Or go to the Have Your Say feedback form on the website. That's no8wired.co.nz. Remember, you can also submit your events for the Rural Diary at our website too.
The Rural Diary, brought to you by Farmers Mutual Group.
Tomorrow, Red Letter Day, it's the deadline for the Farmer Vote on Global Co. The Jersey New Zealand Conference in Hamilton starts. Tuesday, Vintage Farming Films in Huntly, Trust and Science presentation in Hamilton. Wednesday, Federated Farmers Grains Conference in Christchurch, and the Rural Women New Zealand Seminar, Life After Farming, held in Fairlie. Thursday, Creative Fibre Exhibition starts at Wellsford, the Hazardous Substances Workshops in Hamilton, and on Friday, Food Show begins in Auckland, the Kiwifruit AGM in Tauranga.
The Rural Diary, brought to you by Farmers Mutual Group.
That's our program for this week. We'll be back next week talking to Lance Wiggins, one of the long-serving faces on the wool board, who's just done his time.
And I'll be reporting on tulips, millions of them growing in the wilds of Tapanui. Must be one of the most awkward places to get them out of, but they're exported with the promise of delivery anywhere in the world the very next day.